There we are. I think we're here. We're here. We're back, you guys. Let me know. We are having technical issues because always, the whole thing with Facebook yesterday and some other stuff is causing some issues. So I want to make sure that you guys can hear me so we can get some thumbs up before I get going too far. Okay. So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We have been on the road for a while and we are back in the old studio, which is super weird, and not quite as nice as it was before because I got rid of a lot of stuff, you guys. So the shelves are a little more barren than they were before, but we're back and we are going to be here for a while. So before we get too far into talking about what's coming up and what we're doing today, I wanted to thank everybody who came out to our Sew Together Tuesday. We were on the road since July 10th or 11th. We hit the road and we went to a ton of shops. So if we can put that up, Michael, if we can put our little thanks up, then I will talk about all the shops that we went to. So we went to a bunch. We started out with Callie Quilt Co., which was a great event, and she had a ton of people in the shop. We did a couple of days of classes. We did Christmas in July there. We went to Fig Leaf Quilting, which is in Fort Collins, Colorado, and did some classes there. The quilt shop was in Wakefield. You can watch the video. We did that one, and that one is the throw blanket or the throw blanket, I guess is what we call it. And so that one you can watch those. So any of them that we did live, you can rewatch these again. We went to Old Alley. We did some classes on the weekend there. We went to Red Roxy Quilt Co. in Decorah, which I think I might have convinced Hawk that we need to retire there someday. So we'll see. I love Decorah. So we had a really great time at Red Roxy. And then we went up north to the UP. We went up to Time Flies Quilt and Sew, and they served us pasties, our first, which was super fun for some weekend workshops. And we went to Blue Bar Quilt and we did the Sew Together Tuesday there with the Lullaby Quilt. So if you are new to doing the strip quilts, especially the smaller ones, that's a great video for that one. I had to miss Always in Stitches, but we did do classes there, and our brand ambassador, Lisa, she took over for me and she did those classes. So thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. From there, we went over to Quilt Beginnings in Ohio, and we got to do the hooded towel there. Ohio. So we got to see some family, and we did the hooded towel. So that tutorial was done there. So we drove down to Sew It Up Bernina, which is in Houston, and we did the OSQE and some classes, which was fun. We talked all about long arming and even a little bit with domestic, with quilting with Cuddle at the Sew It Up show. Poppy Quilt and Sew was in Austin. We did some classes there for the weekend. Then we drove up to Casey Maker, where I got surprised by my parents who drove across the country to come see us at Casey Maker. And that was where we did paper piecing with Cuddle. So basically taking a paper piecing pattern and making it work with Cuddle. Okay. And then we went to the Pin Cushion, which is in, I'm never going to remember, Sydney, Montana. And they have the Corn Palace. So if you haven't been to the Corn Palace, you have to go and then stop by Pin Cushion too. Then we moved north up to Sew On and Sew North, which is in Langdon, North Dakota. Was it in Mitchell? Did I say the wrong one?
Yeah, I think you said Sydney.
Oh, I said Sydney. I always did that. You're right.
There we go. Mitchell.
Sorry. That's I did that the entire trip. I could not keep those two separate. I don't know what's wrong. Anyway, so yes, it is in Mitchell, South Dakota, which is where the Corn Palace and the Pin Cushion is. So go visit them there. Sew On and Sew North is right near Canada. So we got all the way up there and we did classes there and we did the strip throw. So I know recently people have talked about that on I Love Cuddle is, can you make a throw out of the strips? Yes, you can. Okay. And then we went to Quilts and More, which is in Sydney, Montana. And that was a crazy adventure. And we did classes in their machine shop and we got to see camels. So that was super fun. And then the last shop we visited was Backdoor Quilt Shop, which is in Billings, Montana. And that was where we talked all about stuffed animals. So we had such a great time on this trip going to so many different stores, and we're so grateful that all of them kind of believed in this crazy idea of maybe we could come out and do lives in your shop. And they said yes. So thanks to all of them who said yes. We'll be doing a lot more of this next year. So this season, like I said, we're sticking around here for the most part. We're going to do a couple of little things. Talk about that in a sec. But for all of next year, we're going to be visiting quilt shops. So if you own a quilt shop or you have a favorite quilt shop that you would like us to come to, reach out to them, reach out to us. You can reach out to education@shannonfabrics.com and we can make arrangements to come visit shops in your neck of the woods. So we'll be doing that all of next year and really looking forward to getting back out onto the road.
Hey,
So
East Coasters and Southerners, we're coming for you, promise.
we're coming. We are trying to get our way over there. So that's the plan for 2022. We're going to see you all. Okay. And it was so fun. We had, I don't know, more than 300, 400 people that came out to all of these classes. And it was so much fun to meet everyone. We just had a ball. I think every class was kind of my favorite class. We had a lot of fun everywhere we went. So for everybody who made those drives and flights and, came all the way to see us and to participate in the classes, thank you. And I look forward to seeing many more of you. So what we have coming up this time is we have Quilt Festival is coming in October. Well, it is October already, unfortunately. Time has flowed. So October 25th is the start of Quilt Festival for classes, and I'll be teaching that Monday. I'll be teaching a class about Ellie the elephant. So we're going to have kits to make her, which is that little elephant right up there. So we're gonna spend a day making this little elephant.
Hi,
If you
Ellie.
join me at Quilt Festival, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be super fun, and so that'll be the 25th of October. And then that weekend, so we're going to do a live from Quilt Festival on that Tuesday. And then that weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Hawk and I both will be at Quilt Festival in our booth, which is booth 109, right at the very beginning of the Quilt Festival room. And you'll be able to come and see us and get the pens and get mugs and sew some with me, and it'll be super fun. So if you are planning to come to Quilt Festival, please come by and say hi. If you are going to be there and haven't signed up for the class yet, sign up. We're going to make an elephant. It's going to be super fun. So looking forward to that. And we have a couple other special shop visits that we're going to do, and I'll tell you about that once all of those plans get finalized. Okay. So yeah, Sew Together Tuesday. We did a thing, man. It was super fun. So it was great. I'm looking forward to all of it. For the next while, we're going to do them here back in our studio. So today, was that all I needed to say? Oh, and then I didn't tell you to share it because I always forget. Share it. Because if you share it at the end, we'll be giving away a kit actually to make this blanket. So I have all the stuff to make this blanket over again for you to take and you to make the same one as I have. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So today we're talking about doing a strip quilt and then making it into a self-binding blanket. So it's a self-binding quilt, I guess is really what we would call this. So we're going to take a couple of techniques I'm going to teach you, and we're going to combine them and make them into something different. So the thing that we're going to do today is we're using the Daydream Quilt pattern. So this is a quilt pattern that uses strips down the middle and then does a little bit of courthouse steps. If you're a quilter, you know what that is, the little strips on the outside. So we're gonna do it that way. Let me turn off my phone so it doesn't do that again. Okay, so what you're gonna need is you're gonna need the sweet strips. So we need the 5-pack of that. We have a whole bunch of different sweet strips, and this one is a 5-pack of the Ocean is what we're using. A 1/4 yard of the Cuddle 3 in Snow, because that will be that white border. And then we're going to use 2 yards of the Sparkle Cuddle Glitter. Will give you more than enough and lets you do a bigger border or add other strips in there if you would like. Okay. Then you're going to need the Daydream Quilt pattern, which is available on our website. So if you go to shannonfabrics.com and scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll be able to find the pattern. You can also go to our blog and find all of the information and a recap of this video when it's done. So the video and all of this information will be there, as well as a link to that. The other thing you might want to download is the self-binding blanket pattern as well. So you can also use Quilter's Dream Poly Request batting. So batting is totally optional for this. I'll show you both versions. You're also, of course, going to want a stretch needle, a 9014 stretch needle. Polyester thread. We're using Metrosines from Metler, of course, and make sure that you're using polyester thread for this. You want long flower head pins from Clover, the cutting mat and rotary cutter, and I use them from Olfa. You also want to have a felt tip marker, a Sew Together Tuesday, a felt tip marker if you were lucky enough to come to a class. The jumbo fabric clips, which are basically jumbo wonder clips, stiletto, of course, from My Annie, and some template plastic if you want. So that's totally optional too. I'm going to show you how to do a little trick with this self-binding corners. Okay, so those are the things that you're going to want. I'm going to show you basically what we have. So this is the sweet strip pack, and these come in a variety of them. This is the blue green colors, and then there's also like blue ones, there's brown ones, gray ones. You can do that with any of these. All right, you're going to take these strips. These are 10-inch strips. So these are great if you want to build up your selection of cuddle scraps that you want to use for lots of things. These are great because you get 5 colors in one pack, which is awesome. Okay, you're going to take each of those, and what I've done is I cut them in half. So I wanted to show you guys just a little, because this is one of the questions we got when we were out and about. So these have a little edge where they were cut, they're heat cut. So it has a little hard edge sort of thing on it. Okay, that's perfectly normal and does not need to be cut off. All right, that was a question I got a lot, is do you have to cut that off? And nope, not at all, just leave it in there. You'll never feel that when it's on the inside of your blanket. Okay, so I took these strips, I cut them in half, and then I sewed them to the backing. Okay, actually, I'm just going to move this whole thing for just a second here, because I'm going to need the space. I don't have a lot of space. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to unfold this so I can show you where I'm at. So this whole thing is done, quilt as you go, and stitch and flip method. So if you see any of the other tutorials or you get it in the pattern and it says to do it a stitch and flip, this is what we're talking about. And this whole middle is made this way, and then I sew more strips out. So I started in the middle. Let me see if that's the way she did too, because this one was made by our brand ambassador, Michelle. So I start in the middle and then I work my way out, and I'm going to put the strips down as we go. Okay. So this is the strip. This one was cut 2.5 inches. This one is cut 2 inches. Okay. That information is extra for you. So what I'm going to do is I want to put this here. So the easiest thing to do is to measure this. So when we're doing this middle part, all of these are cut to 30 inches. You could absolutely do it the full width. All right. So if you do it the full width, you will need to have a different backing, or you could cut them at 50 inches in half, because what we're going to do is we're going to bring this backing around. Okay. So, but you could use wider widths if you want to. 30 inches is what we've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay this down and basically measure it that way, which is kind of the cheater method. The other way that you can do it, I had my little, there it is. You can take and you can measure this, your strip. So let's see if I measure it. Then I have to get it laid a little flatter. Okay, so if I measure this, I'm going to get 35 inches.
What are you measuring from and to? Sorry, from the
end of this one to the end of this one, because that's what I want to do.
That guy. Okay.
Okay, so 35 inches. So if I measure this, this should be 35 inches too. So I'm going to put that. There we go. Okay. Marked it with just a little shove into the fabric there so I could see a little blip. Okay. All right. So now I can put that out here. So this is the way all of them work. So when you're doing a stitch and flip, this is just a tiny little strip that we're doing. This whole thing is done the exact same way. As you put a strip on, you put the next one next to it, flip it over, pin it, sew it. Okay. That's the way we built it out. So I'm going to show you how we do that. And it is a super easy way of doing it. This one is done with the batting. The other one that I'll show you when we're finished here is not. So you can do it with or without.
What's going on with the nap, with this little border?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. Let me see. I did do it the right way. So basically the nap is running this way for the quilt, but these strips are cut with the fabric. So the nap is actually going sideways on these. Okay. So the nap is going this direction and the nap is going this way. But when it's sideways, it still seems smooth. So it totally works. Okay, so that's what we do. So these are sideways. This way the nap is going down. You can see that really well. If I push it the other direction, you can see it gets all zebra stripey there. Okay, so these are going the other direction. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, thanks for asking. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and this is the way I always do it, is I lay it out how I want it to finish. So this is what I want it to look like, is this little strip is going to be there for that whole edge. Then I flip it over. All right, and I always do that because that way visually I know how to put it on, and I can also test to make sure the nap is going in the same direction, then flip it right sides together. Okay, and I'm going to pin it in the corner over here. And then I'll pin it on the other. I'm going to try to keep this as nice and even as possible. So this is about as wide as I can get on my cutting mat here. Okay. in place. And this is one of those that sometimes this little strip will grow a little bit because of how it's being put on there. And if it does, I just let it work off the end and trim it. So we'll see if that happens today. Okay. The other ones, the ones in here, I've measured very specifically to 30 inches for all of them. So they fit very nicely and I make sure they do. This one I haven't measured quite as carefully. Okay. So these are all have all been spray basted down. And I'm just going to put those sides together, the raw edges, and pin it. Okay, so you'll notice that I kind of pin in this way that I pin the middle or the ends and then between the middle. And I'm just going to keep subdividing that. Okay. And then I pin my second row. So for most of these pins, these are out of my box of clover pins. So they're the extra strong ones. So they, these are the two, both sides are the salmon color on this guy and that they're stronger. So let me see if I can find one. So this is the other one that's salmon on one side, but red on the other. These are a little bendier. These are a medium weight pin. These are a heavyweight pin.
But you recommend them both?
I recommend them both. When I'm doing something like this and I've got 3 layers of cuddle and the batting, I try to use the heavyweight ones because I can get it down and back up through without bending pins. Okay, because they do the other ones, they'll bend sometimes if you're not careful.
Got it.
So if you try to shove it through too much, it's like, nope, can't do that. So I try not to use those on the really thick stuff. So we're just going to double pin the whole thing. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. Okay. And I'm just going to pin it really well so I can sew along here. Now, one of the things that you'll notice if you make, if you do anything that is a strip quilt, one of the things that you'll notice is that when you're folding this back, your naps are now going opposite of each other. All right. And sometimes they'll like to fight each other. If that happens, you're going to choose the lower one to follow your 1/2 inch seam allowance on. All right. But sometimes these will wobble and that's fine because we'll fix it on the next round. But just so you know, it's not you when that happens. It really is the fabric. All right. I get that question a lot. All right. So let's bring it on over. So we've got it all double pinned. Oops, I got one more spot I need to put a pin in. So we got it all double pinned, except for that one little spot right there. Okay, and now we're going to take it to the machine. I've got the thread already in here, so I'm using Metrocene thread, which is what I like. It's a poly thread, and it's really important that you use poly when you're working with the cuddle because it's stretchy. So it makes a huge difference. I'm going to sit just a little bit because this one has a lot to wrangle, so I don't normally sit. But
she never does that. It's such a that's such a diversion from your normal behavior.
It really is. But when it's a lot to wrangle, this is a heavier quilt because it's got all of the batting in it. It tends to be a lot for me to try to hold while I'm standing. So
okay, we're going to do that over here.
Okay, oops, we got it on the wrong stitch. So thanks. We want it on a straight stitch. I'm going to bump it up to a 3 stitch length. And I've changed my presser foot pressure so it's up just a little bit. I'm using the digital dual feed that is on my crescendo here. Okay. And see if we can do this. All right. Try to get this to feed under.
And you don't start at the beginning of the fabric. You start
I didn't.
in.
I started in just a little bit. Okay.
And then you do the back stitch to get it back to the beginning.
Yep, and that secures the end as well as giving it a place to start. So what I found is that if you try to start before the fabric and then move on to the fabric, it has a harder time getting over it. So if I start with it under all the way, it's a little bit better. So I'm just going to do this a 1/2 inch all the way down. If you struggle with keeping that 1/2 inch, sometimes I do, you can also put a line on here. And I've had people do that in classes where they draw your 1/2 inch seam allowance and then follow that line.
We don't usually do shout outs, but Creation Nobilis from Tunisia, welcome. Awesome. We hope that you get to sew with Minky and have it not be as hard after watching Teresa.
Yes. I'm excited to have people from all over. We had a ton of different people today. It's great. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working my way along here. And because it has the batting, it will be a little bit more. So that's part of it, is that it weighs more because of the batting. So you can see I have to like, yeah, deal with it more. Take my time, take my pins out of the way. Try not to stab myself too much. Okay.
We'll come around so we can see what your backhand is doing.
And hopefully it's not getting stabbed by pins at the moment.
Okay.
That's always the worst, is when I'm sewing and they kind of stab yourself. It happens. So I'm just trying to keep it coming along. So this is something that people ask a lot, is like, it won't feed under the machine by itself, and it doesn't want to. And that's part of your job, is to keep it coming through the machine. So I just keep a hand on it and I just guide it through. So when I need to use the stiletto, I'll push that down and keep the fabric where I want it to. And then when I need to push it or pull it just a little bit, I will. That pushing it is very minimal though. And it really is just kind of trying to keep some tension on the fabric more than actually pulling it. If you pull it too hard, what ends up happening is you bend your needle and then you break a needle. So try not to pull too much as you're just guiding it through the machine, because it is a lot. And especially when we're dealing with this, like we've got the, like I said, 1, 2, 3 layers of cuddle plus the batting. So it can be a lot. So if your machine struggles a little, taking the batting out will help a bunch. You just have to be a little bit more careful, because the batting helps give it stability so it won't stretch too much. So if you don't use the batting, you're more likely to get a little bit of stretch to it. All right, I'll keep this position. You can see on this little spot here, I've got this, the selvage still on there. I did not take the selvage off. All right, so that can just stay on here. It's going to get hidden underneath the seam anyway, and it's not ugly. Okay, all right. So let's come back over here. Get my pins tucked away, so I don't get them caught in the quilt like we did last night. Remember? You're like, wait, there's a pin. It got stuck. Okay, so I'll take any pins that were left. There were not a lot, so that's good. Okay, so this is the way it is for all of the stitch and flip. All right, you're gonna put your strip together, you're gonna pin it, you're gonna sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Normally that's the edge of your walking foot. Okay, and we do always recommend a walking foot for the strip quilts. Okay, so I'm going to try to get this as flat as possible for this area that I'm working with. All right, the rest of it, I don't really care what happens to it. It's fine. All right, and I have a couple of things here. So this is a piece of freezer paper, nothing fancy, that I'm going to put here so that I don't spray on the front of my quilt. Okay, and then I'm actually going to put this across the top just a little bit, because I don't want to spray too much on the top, on the batting.
Vicky from Scotland.
Vicky from Scotland's back. Yay!
We missed you too. Hi.
Okay, so I'm going to spray the back of this strip is my goal. So I'm going to put this so that it's covering just a little bit of here. Find my basting spray. So I've got it so that this is covering the front of my quilt. So all of my right side is not going to get sprayed on. I'm going to spray the back of this and then flip it over. So you can see I put this here because I don't want to get a bunch of the spray up on the batting.
Okay, what's this?
And
what's that spray?
It
Besides,
is the
hard to get the lid off of?
It is the 505 spray. I know there's a trick to it, and sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. So this is the 505 spray from O'Deef. It is it's excellent basting spray. It does not smell, which is to me a game changer in basting spray. And I'm just going to spray it along the back.
It doesn't smell at all.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's amazing.
Okay, so we're just going to cover it with a thin. Can you see that, the little webbing, if you come in here really
here
quick?
I come.
So you can see how that's covered. Okay, so not big batches of it, just a little webbing of it. And I'm just going to flip this up, kind of give it a little tug as I work my way across here. Okay, it's really important that you're pulling this way and not this way, because that way it would stretch the fabric, and we don't want to do that. Okay, we just want to make it hold tight, basically. Okay. All right. So now it's close enough to straight. Okay. That's how I view it. Close enough to straight. All right. So that is out of there. So if you see this top wiggles a little bit, and I'll show you in another part how that happens, this wiggles a little because the fabric moved slightly while I was sewing. So this next part, what I do, I basically take that out of the equation, for lack of a better phrase here. Okay. So now what I want to do is create, show you the finished here. What I want to do is create these corners. So I've gotten to a point now where I've got all of my strips on and I've got the 2 mallard pieces sewn on. Now I need to create this binding by bringing the back over to the front. So the trick here is figuring out how you need to cut the backing so that you can bring it over to the front. All right, so what I do is I want to, on this one, I'm leaving, sorry, we're going to flip it?
No, it's okay.
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 Let me put that to the side. So then what I'm going to do is I want to have a 3-inch border on this. It's what I decided I wanted. And not for any particular reason, except that I think it looks nice. So really, it's one of those things where you get to choose the aesthetics. Okay, so I'm going to move this so we can see, reach a little bit better. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my ruler, and I've got a couple of different rulers that I'm using here today. There's no particular reason why I'm using either of these. That's just what I have. But this is the 1-inch line. I'm going to put this on my seam line because that's where I want the fabric to come to. Okay, so I want to keep this as even as possible when I'm sewing. So I'm going to bring this over so that it hits 1 inch, which means I need to go 3 inches past and then 3 inches so that we'll fold over 3 inches and land here. Okay. Okay. So this is the math part that gets confusing sometimes, is when you're figuring out how big is your border, figure out where you want your border to end and then add your inches from there. So if I wanted to add a 4-inch border, I would add 4 inches and 4 inches and then bring it over and it would land here 1 inch away. Okay. Got it. So I just use that. This is my, that 1 inch. Once I have that down there, I could do 1 1/4 if I wanted to, whatever it was that I wanted. I would stick it here and then measure. So that's what I'm going to do. And I have my ruler. I'm going to use 3 inches, which means I can use my 6-inch ruler, which is awesome. Okay. And I'm going to butt that up to here. So I'm just going to make sure that my fabric is as neat as possible where I'm tracing it. Okay. And are we getting questions about that?
Not yet.
Okay. So if this gets confusing, this is the part that I was telling Hawk yesterday. I'm going to have to think this through because I always do. Really have to take a little moment to think about it. Okay.
I think to reiterate, you are cueing off of a width here, not paying any attention to whether the edge of that dark mallard fabric is wiggly.
Because we can see it should be about a 1/2 inch away because it was cut 2 inches. I sewed about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can see this little line. It is not exactly a 1/2 inch.
And you can just ignore that.
I just
all
ignore
that's
it.
About to get hidden inside of your next seam
Exactly. And that's really important because if you measure from here and you do a 1/2 inch here, your corner is going to turn in. But we can make it so that it doesn't even look like the corner turned in at all. We just hide it. So yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna do the same thing here. So I'm gonna count back 6 inches from here. Unfortunately, this is my 1/2 inch end, so it's gonna be a little weird. So here, if I count back, 6 inches is there. So it means here is where I want it to go. So basically what I did is, it's a little bit confusing because this is the 1/2 inch end. So here's 1 inch right here. Okay, so here's my 1/2 inch line, my 1/2 inch line. So that means I have an inch this side too. And then my about a 1/2 inch. But that means from here to here, I've got 6 inches.
Got it.
So I know that this is going to be the line there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bump my ruler up here. It's still on my 1 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and mark my square corner. Okay, so when we're doing self-binding blankets, it's really important that we have square corners, because if you don't have a square corner, you're not going to end up with the right miter. So that's one way to get that corner to work out. So I'm going to move this over. We're going to do the same thing on the other end over here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, lay this out. Put my small ruler on here, about 1 inch along that line. So you can kind of tweak this. So don't feel like you can't move things and shove things around to get that line as straight as possible. And like I said, we don't care how even that top one is. We want this to go right along the seam. I'm gonna bump my ruler up here and continue my little line. Okay, do the same thing here. So if I do 6 inches, that's where I want it to be. I want a 1 inch border and then 6 inches. Okay, so here's where that's going to be, and I'm going to bump it up to 1 inch here. I'm going to slide my ruler down and get my square corner. Okay, so now that's my outer corner. So if I were doing this without any batting, this is where I would get to just start making the corners. But because we use batting, we want to cut the batting out of the area that will be the mitered part. Otherwise, it's too thick, and then you would have a raw edge of batting alongside with your cuddle, which wouldn't work very well. Okay, this is exactly the way you're going to do it if you want to do it with a cotton quilt. So let me show that really quick before I forget. So if you came to any of my classes and you did the self-binding blanket, this is a sample that I always brought out because I think this is a funny story. Plus, it actually works really well. So this quilt is a little quilt that I had started for my nephew when he was 5. And then I got overwhelmed with how long it was taking. So I stopped making it, and he just graduated high school last year. So we never got it. And now it's a sample, but it's a cotton front quilt, a design from Thomas Knauer. I quilted it just a little bit, and then I did this same process. The thing is that when you're doing a cotton quilt, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you're going to measure a 1/4 inch from here is what your a 1/4 inch down, and that's how you're going to measure yours. But we want to keep the batting. So when you're measuring it, you're going to do the same thing with a cotton quilt. Okay, and we'd be able to finish this just like this, and the cotton batting will come up the edge. Okay, so let me show you how you do it. So I just want you to know that you can absolutely do this with a cotton quilt as well. Okay, and you're going to do this same method because with a cotton quilt, you're going to have the batting in there. So at this point, we want to make sure that we trim it out the right depth. So if you remember right, how big of a binding did we say? Do you remember?
3 inches.
3 inches. So that way, I want to measure down 3 inches from this edge. And I'm going to mark it again after I get my ruler back in position. Okay, so I'm going to mark my 3 inches. I marked some of it down the side. I'm going to finish marking it now because I did get a little jump on this yesterday. Okay, so 3 inches. Come back over here, do the same thing. Okay, so mark my 3 inch border.
I was going to say, we want a 3 inch bindings, and you left 6 inches of fabric, one for each side, but you did not actually add any for the around the corner.
No, because the around the corner is just going to be part of it. I marked it on 4 inches here. Sorry, guys. Okay, so 3 inches and 3 inches. So I'm going to mark that. So it worked the last time I did it. So we'll see if it works again this time.
Got
okay?
It. I
would say trust me, but you know,
I really like the way that the edge finished on this over here.
Yeah.
A lot. I think it's really classy.
Yeah, I think it's really lovely. So that's
worth.
and that's what we'll do here. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off at the 6 inch mark that we did. So I like to make all of my marks first. You could absolutely cut it and then your 6 inch and then mark your 3 inch if that was easier for your brain. I just do all the marking first. Okay. So I'm cutting through the batting and the backing with this.
At the 6 inch line.
At the 6 inch line. Okay, and making sure that my fabric is as flat as possible. So the bigger quilt cutting table you have, the better. We always have limited space here. But you know, that's the way I've sewn for most of my life, is with limited space. So that's how it works. So I just get it as flat as possible, because really the last thing you want to do is cut it crooked because you didn't lay it out flat. Okay. All right, and then one more edge here. Okay. There we go. All right.
There's a little sneak peek about what happens next.
That's right. Also, more scraps, you guys. That means more scrap giveaways. So while we're here in town, we'll be, I have a scrap box somewhere. Oh, it's way over there.
Yeah.
I'll be gathering scraps. We'll do some more scrap giveaways on the I Love Cuddle group. So if you're not there yet, you should join I Love Cuddle, because we have giveaways and lots of fun things over there, as well as some really lovely people. So,
oh yeah, and that's Sparkle Cuddle. You know you want the scraps.
Oh my goodness, seriously.
So cool.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to come right along this line and cut it. So the batting has been spray basted, but I can just pull this up. Okay. I'm going to cut along that line. So you want to make sure that if your batting is sprayed down well, that you pull it back up, because you don't want to nick that back fabric. Okay, these are my lovely Kais that I just had. There's the number that I had sharpened just before I left. They're lovely. So Kai scissors are my favorite for big cutting. They're awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and cut along this line too.
Are those micro serrated?
Yes, they are.
I thought so. Even though they're that big, that big form factor,
yep.
I could hear it while you're cutting.
Yep, they are micro serrated as well. So they cut really, really nicely. And they'll cut all sorts of, different fabrics like Cuddle and silks and satins and all sorts of stuff really nicely. Okay, hold on. Got to loosen this up again. I really don't want to nick that back fabric. All right, so the other thing that you can do, but I'm not very good at, is measuring it first and then just being very careful as you sew, so you don't have to trim this down. But I can't figure out those measurements before I start, so I don't. I don't even try. I don't even try. I just do it once I'm here. I'd rather.
I mean, sometimes things change along the way.
They do, and seam allowances are hard to keep perfectly even. But you know, we're all good at different things. That's not something I'm good at, but I know other people are. Try to reach across here. That second line is confusing me. It's probably confusing everyone else too.
Please ignore.
Please ignore the other red line. It is a friction pen, so if I had my iron here, I could just iron it really quick and get rid of it. But just going to have to leave it there for now. So I'm taking all of this off, because bringing this over, this is what I was talking about, is we're going to bring this over. Bringing that over with this thick edge would not be a good idea. It won't sit as nicely, because now we have like this big thick edge in here. Okay. It also makes this super thick. So one of the things is that I always keep this batting edge in here so that that will stay kind of an even depth thickness over to the edge, but we don't want to add a second layer of that thickness. Okay. Almost there. Okay, if
my left hand really wants to help.
Does it? If you're really careful, you can pull the batting back away and do this all with the rotary cutter too, and then you can pull it back and then cut it off. I found that if I'm careful and if I'm awake and it's morning, I can do that very easily. If I'm a little bit tired, that's when I tend to nick the back, and then once you do that, you can't do the self-binding blanket so well. So learn from my mistakes. Okay. All right. So once we've gotten to this point, you can see we've got our edging. Okay. So this is the front, the batting, and the backing is how that works. All right. So this, like I said, this will work with any quilt that you do on the front, whether it's a strip quilt or a patchwork quilt, it's cotton, it's Cuddle, flannel, whatever you want to do for the front. If you do it this way, you can bring your Cuddle backing around to the front because you have quilted it as you've gone. So all of that quilting is done. And now we just have to bind it. All right. So in the pattern for the Daydream quilt, it says to just trim it and then bind it. And you can absolutely do that. But this for me is kind of a quicker way of binding it that to me, it's a little bit less effort and I like it. So let me show you how these corners work. Okay. It's a lot of quilt here. Okay, so I've got my corners marked. I'm actually going to grab my little ruler now. Let me see if I have my sew together. I do. I have my sew together pen. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to use this. I'm going to show you how we do it. So we have marked 3 inches. Okay. Like, did that get not square? It did not sit square. I'm going to square it up there. Okay. So remember how I was talking about it's really important that it's square. If it's not, square it up. Okay. And I can tell it's square because it goes down each side of my ruler like that. That's really important. It's nice. Okay. So I've got my 3-inch border. And then I should have a 3-inch border. Worked out okay. Did. All right. So I'm going to show you. This is the way I'm going to pull this back so we can kind of work with it without it. So this is how we always do a self-binding blanket corner. Do this little miter. Okay, as I mark how big I want my border. So I marked 3 inches on each side. Then I need to mark my corner. This is my Olfa ruler, the QR 6x12. The reason I like this has my name. Is because of this marking. Okay, because that 45 I can just lay right on here. I can put it on either line that I just drew. And I know where my 45-degree angle is going to be. Okay, because it's Cuddle, we don't have to be super duper perfect. So 45-ish is really good, but you need to have it as close as possible. If you're doing this with another ruler, so say like this one here, this is where people get confused, is we need to take and make a triangle at this corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my 45-degree lines, line it up against one of the ones that I drew, and then mark my line here. Okay, so same idea. Always try to remember that your corner is up here. Okay, when we do this, then we're going to take this. We're going to turn these corners together. And we're going to sew right along here. Okay, I'm going to show you that in just a second because what I want to show you is an easier way of doing this than doing this at every corner. Because now we've done it here. We need to go to the other corner, mark the same thing, mark the same thing, mark the same thing. What I found is that marking that 45-degree over and over gets a little bit, I don't know, it's hard the first few times that you do it. So what I have found, we'll pull this out so you can see this better without the shine all over it, is that if I make myself a template, I don't know why that won't come out. There we go. If I make myself a template, it works much better. So I'm going to use this from Karen K. Buckley. It's heat resistant template plastic. It doesn't need to be heat resistant. It needs to just be a template plastic. But this is what was available. So I got it. So I'm going to make myself a template for the corner right here because I've got a square corner. I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3. My line just as if I were doing this with fabric. Okay, so again, my 3-inch border, my 3-inch border. I'm going to go ahead and stick this on here. My 45-degree angle on there as close as possible. And go ahead and draw my corner. Okay, I'm going to write up here, 3-inch self-binding blanket. Okay, so I know exactly what that is.
So
now,
that's the exact same marks that you did.
The exact
there.
same marks that I did right here. Exactly.
Got it.
Okay, so now all I'm going to do is go ahead and cut this off. See if I, there it is. Cut so smoothly, I wasn't sure it cut it. Okay, so now I've got a template that I can use for each of these corners. So instead of drawing that whole thing all over again, I'm just going to come to the other corner. I'm going to lay this out. And I'm going to draw my line. So the reason I like doing this is because you can make this for all the sizes that you want to do. Okay, I can also double check to make sure that my corner is actually square. Okay, and then I can just make these, like I said, for any size that I want. If you put them on like a little ring, you could have all of your sizes and have all the sizes that you like doing together, nice and easy. And then you never have to do that little funky measuring thing again. So there we go. See how much faster that is? So much better. So if you're going to make a bunch of self-binding blankets or self-bound quilts for Christmas, birthdays, this is a great way of doing it. Okay. Go ahead and do that line again. And I think that was the last one. Yep, that was it. All right, so now I've got these. I'm going to keep this for a future use. If you get the little template plastic, you can make a whole bunch of them out of one piece. So the pieces are all 8 by 11 pieces. So you could make a few of them out of each one, be able to keep those nice and handy for when you want to do more of the self-binding. The little fabric, it's all fabric. The little cotton one that I did, this is actually a 1-inch border is what I did for this. So it would come around just 1 inch, which I really like. Okay, so you can make a 1-inch border and be able to whip all 4 corners out super duper easy. That's the hardest part, is doing that. All right, so once we've got our borders or our corners matched, I'm going to go ahead and fold this. So I want to show you guys. So if you can come over my shoulder just a little bit. When you're doing this, I want you to do it so that this is your corner up here, and you're always going to fold it like this. Okay, so the corner should always be out this direction. All right, this is important because we want to start sewing up here and sew toward the fold. So start at the raw edge, sew toward the fold. We're going to get this, make sure those lines are pretty darn close to matching. Okay, if I stab it through here, it should be pretty close. Yep, I'd say that's pretty close. You think? Yeah.
Nice shot.
Thanks. They matched up just fine. So with the Cuddle, because this is a flat Cuddle, this is the sparkle Cuddle, I don't have all the fluff here at the edge to kind of hide it if I don't get these to match up correctly. So I want them to match up really nice. Then I'm going to lay this down, get it nice and neat, get my corners back to where they're supposed to be. Okay, and then I'm going to pin on either side. Doesn't want to go through because of the basting spray that's on it. It's fighting me just a little. Okay. And I'm going to put pins on either side of that line. And now I'm going to sew from here to here. So we're going to do a couple of corners, show you how to do that. So one of the reasons that I like to do it this way is because one of the things that happens when you do it with all of these lines is you have all of these lines. And then these lines get confusing. And more than once, someone has tried to sew it on this line. So if you sew it on that line, it's not the end of the world, just come back and sew it on this line. But if you do it just with the template, you only have the one line. So there's no way to mess that one up. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin that on either side. Get that nice and neat. And now let's come over here and sew this. All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to do a straight stitch. All right. Hold on, I have to get my foot pedal. Decided to escape. Okay, so I'm going to get this underneath here. So one of the things that I do when I'm doing this corner with a flat Cuddle is I will put my needle down, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bump this right up to where my needle is going to hit the marking. Okay, I'm going to take this pin out. I'm going to lift this up.
Or you hand crank the needle up at that moment?
I hand cranked it up, right? Yeah, I mean, you could put the needle up button, but you're kind of covering it with the camera. So then I'm just going to put it in there. So yeah, but you just want to put your needle up and put it back down. You just want to get it lined up first. Okay, then I'm just going to sew along this whole thing. Okay, do another little back stitch. Clip my thread. Okay. At this point, I have a big dog ear. I'm going to take my pins out. I've got this big dog ear. I'm not going to cut it off yet, because what I want to do is I want to flip it around, make sure that it's going to work. Okay, totally gonna work. Now I can go ahead and cut that off. I'm gonna sew the other one too, so we can get both of those done, and then I'll cut those off. So normally when I'm doing this, I would do all 4, and then I would cut them off. Okay, so again, I'm gonna put my needle down, check it, put my foot there. I don't want to put my foot down. Oh, there we go. Needle up, move it in just a little, needle down, and then I could back stitch right along that line, right up to the edge. So what that does is it keeps the edges really nice and even as I'm sewing. Because one thing will happen is that the Cuddle 3 the flat Cuddle will like to slide a little bit with you there. And if the corners don't match perfectly, you'll totally see it. Okay, so again, I'm gonna take my pins out. Look, I just sewed over a pin. Did you see that?
Nope.
I don't know how that happened, but that was exciting. So that's gonna totally work. All right, now I can cut it.
Never happened.
Okay, so trim that. Just a little, about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And like I said, do this all 4 corners. Where's the other corner I did? There it is. Okay, make sure that it's nice and flat. I will tell you, one of the things that happens is if you're not careful, you get things folded under, and then you trim things where you shouldn't be trimming things. Okay, then pop that out. So I'm gonna go ahead, lay this down nice and flat, because this batting should go right up into the corner. So the one nice thing about this is that edge of the batting becomes a nice fold line. So it will fold really easily. So you can see the battings right there. It's going to fold right nicely along that edge. Okay, it'll give you a nice firm edge there that you don't have if you don't use the batting. Because if you don't use the batting, it's still really floppy along the edge. On here, makes it nice and neat. Okay, so you can see how well that's going to work. All right, so then the next thing I do is I go ahead, try to find my ruler. It has the 1-inch marks. So this should, if I did it right, it should come out with a 1-inch corner. So I use my little ruler to mark my 1 inch. Come on, little guy, there we go. Okay. I'm gonna get this to sit in there. Nice and neat, okay? So I'm gonna do that the whole way around. So if it's a big quilt, I'm obviously going to do, well, not obviously, because some people do want to pin the entire way around. I will do a section at a time because I don't really want to pin the entire way. But I will pin a side at a time here. I'm going to pin it. Okay, and I keep using my ruler just like I did the first place. This is where I cut it so that it would end here. So now I can use my ruler to be like, yes, this is where it should end. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Also,
sometimes the numbers get weird.
You are definitely paying very close attention to which direction you're putting the heads of the pins in.
Yes.
Because you're thinking about which direction you're going to sew from later.
Exactly, exactly. So I always want to put the pins, so I'm right-handed, so the pins go this direction. If I were left-handed, I would be pinning from this side, so I would have this whole thing turned around because I want the pins to, the point to be at the part where the needle is going to come down first so I can pull these out as I'm going. Okay. It takes a little bit of practice to get better at that. Once you get into the habit, it's actually super duper helpful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pin this. We're going to sew just a little bit around this corner so I can show you how that works. Okay. Make sure I'm getting still an inch down here. Okay, and I just use my rulers as the marking. It's just easier. If this were something else, you could mark the fabric and then bump it up to that, but the ruler works really well. Okay, so once I've gotten it to here, I'm going to stitch around it. So just like any other self-binding blanket, you could do a zigzag or you can do a serpentine or a straight stitch. I like a serpentine. I think it looks really nice. If you don't, and I'm using this, so I'm going to change it over there to a serpentine. Oops, on your machine, it will usually look like, so it looks like this stitch here. Okay, when I hit it, I have it so it's a longer stitch. And so it looks a little bit different on there. And that one is a 4 wide, 1.8 long. Okay. So it's a little bit, it's a longer S curve. So you can see on your machine, it will look like this. It'll look like a real S, but I always lengthen it so it's less. All right. It stitches a little bit curvier than that, but that's what it will look like. I always suggest that you go ahead and you try it out on some scrap first to see what you like and change those measurements to be what you want it to be. All right.
There's a great question. Will the batting shift when you wash the quilt and will it bunch up?
No, because it's quilted.
Right.
So this whole way here, it's all quilted.
Right. So it can't move past any of those seam lines.
Exactly. And we're
Got
going to
it.
stitch it along here, and then we're going to do a top stitching as well. So yeah, it will be secure in there just fine. So let me do a little lock stitch here, and then we're going to do a little sewing here.
If you're doing it on cotton, how do you turn under the hem? I mean, that would only be if you were doing the back as the cotton.
Right, exactly. So if you were, you wouldn't do this technique with a cotton backing. You would only do this with a cuddle backing. So you could have a cotton quilt here, quilt it all. You can quilt it on the long arm and then trim the outside to do this with cuddle. So I wouldn't do this technique with cotton because it would be not a time saver for me. It's a time saver for me with the cuddle because I really like the cuddle backing. I also farm out my long arming. Oh, hello. What are we stuck on? Oh, look, my needle just fell out. That's exciting.
Whoa.
That hasn't happened. Check at that. I was like, why did it just stop sewing? Oh, that's why. Okay, so hold on. Too many things happening right there. So I would say it's time to switch my needle, but I don't know if I have any extra needles right here. We had this happen in a class and we had like 3 people lose their needles. And it's sometimes what happens. Sometimes what happens when you're using a regular walking foot, that'll happen because your walking foot will often kind of jiggle your needle loose. I haven't had that happen on my crescendo before. Okay, so I guess that's that perk of sewing slowly, huh? Okay. Where's my thread?
Gone.
It is.
Gone.
I can find it up here.
Oh, look, another use for the stiletto.
So many uses for the stiletto.
I saw that. I may not have quite
it.
gotten it on camera. That was happening fast.
It would not be the first time. All right, so let's see if I can get it to thread. I have to move that. Sorry. Nope. Okay, it doesn't want to use the needle threader. Come on.
Of course not. Persnickety machine.
I'm trying to, I don't know what, I can't read that. What's it say? Remove the fabric from under the foot. I did. Oh, I just had to push the OK button that I removed the fabric because it couldn't tell that I actually did. Okay. There we go.
Nice.
Get that thread out of there because I hate it when it accidentally sucks up again because that happens. All right, so let me see where I was. There it is. So I'm going to get back over to about where I was in the stitch. I'm sure we'll be able to have a little goof in the back, and that's okay. I'm going to lock it, and again, I'm going to stitch. So when I'm stitching, if you can see, there's a little line right here on my foot. This is the furthest place that my needle comes over. So this is something to figure out on your machine, is that when it's coming over to the left, how far does it go over? Mine goes to this little line right here, and that's where I keep on this edge. So that's what I'm looking at as I'm sewing, is keeping this raw edge to go right on that line. All right. And then as it gets over to that side of the stitch, it'll hit just off that edge if I'm careful. Okay. And I hope that's working because I can't really see. Oh, I could look at the camera here and I could see it better. Okay, so I'm going to come, oops, sorry. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to hold this in position. Try to get this to be as nice and square as possible as I come up to this corner. Okay, now wherever I stop, it's at that corner. I'm just going to switch it around here.
You just left the needle down and you pivoted.
I pivoted, exactly. So you can see I'm just kind of moving it just a little so it, oops, that it gets into the right position again. And then I'm going to keep sewing. Okay, so I just pivot right around that corner and let it keep going. Okay, we're going to sew just a little bit more.
And if you've gotten that second outside row of pins in the right spot, you can just leave them there. They just ride right along the outside of the walking foot.
Yes, exactly. That's the way these guys worked, is they can just stay in there. So now you can see it's just stitched down all along this edge. Okay. So it's a nice flat little edge there. And I really like the way that the serpentine looks. So I'm going to stitch just a little bit right here. We're going to switch this over real quick to the zigzag just to show what that looks like. So if your machine does a zigzag, it's going to be the same way. I'm using a 5-5 zigzag. So I'm starting the same thing. I know that it comes over here. So I'm keeping my raw edge on that line. And we're just going to stitch down here just a little bit. See if I can even that out just a tiny. I didn't put any pins down here. It's a mistake,
what are you
man.
doing?
That is a mistake. Okay. But let's see what happened. All right. So I just want to do a little bit. I don't love the zigzag on the cuddle, on just the flat cuddle, but it does mush in really nicely. So just have to sew it nice and carefully. All right. So if you wanted to do, you could do a blanket stitch here too, or you could do a straight stitch. For me, the serpentine is just the look that I like the best. All right, so that's
Can we see the back, especially where you had to start and stop because your thread broke? I'd love to see what that might look like. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you can't find it because it's impossible.
It was over here. It was on the first little bit, right?
Yeah.
I guess I did okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. That's the tail.
Yeah. All of that to say what Jackie said, which is apparently Teresa has a black belt in serpentine stitch.
Maybe that's it. Oh, I can't tell where the thread is.
If you can't tell, no one can tell.
Okay, so that's what it looks like on the back. I think it looks pretty nice. All right, and then the other thing that we can do is to go over here. So two things. I like to do these little corners, and I don't always do it, but it looks really nice if you do. So I'm just doing a straight stitch starting from the corner, and I'm going to follow that line out. So I'm going to do the same, and I'm going to lock my stitch here, and then I'm just going to follow right along the seam line here.
You're going to stitch in the ditch.
Just going to stitch in the ditch. Exactly. So if you've got the foot, it'll make it even easier. Otherwise, you can just eyeball it. It's fine. Okay. And then I'm going to lock stitch it here and cut it. So when we're doing the throws, sometimes we do this, and then people often want to turn around and go back this direction. What I found is there's nothing to grab up here. So to make it start going again, so like if I try to start sewing, it doesn't want to move. Do you see that? It's just stuck
the
there.
belt can't, or the
walking foot can't reach it.
Dogs can't reach it.
It can't reach it. There's hardly anything under there, and it's thick, so it doesn't want to move. So I will tell you, this is another little use for your stiletto. So you can kind of jam it in the corner. Just don't get it too far in there so that you hit your needle, and you can come back. Okay. So that is a trick that people will use, because what you can do is stitch along here, stitch out, come back. All right. I choose not to do that. I just stitch out to the end, do a lock stitch, and finish. Okay. So now that's what that looks like on the back. It gives it just a crisper corner. All right. Which is nice. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch this. And I'm going to use about 1/4 of an inch. And I got it on. I'm going to take my thread to a 3 stitch count. Okay. And I'm just going to stitch right along this edge.
Are there any different tricks? Maybe this is a little early of a question. Are there any different tricks if you were going to use a luxe cuddle or a thicker napped cuddle for this backing self-binding blanket project?
The only thing I would really do differently is I wouldn't do a serpentine, because I don't use serpentines on luxes. I just feel like it's a waste of pretty stitching. So I just use a zigzag.
It just gets hidden.
It just gets hidden in there. So and the other thing is that I want to say I don't know that I would do this top stitching. I would definitely stitch out to the corner, but I don't think I would do a top stitching on it. So you can see, like, every once in a while I get a little weird, and so I'll just kind of like reposition it, make it nice and flat, and keep going. So this outside stitching makes a big difference in how nicely I feel like that the sides will lay. Like you were saying, it kind of classes things up a little bit.
This is a really, really classy finish, in my opinion. Again,
Okay, so we got the serpentine. We stitched out to the corner with the straight stitch, and then stitched around the whole border with the straight stitch.
The sparkle,
all right,
just
the sparkle is so good, and you can see how. So I'll show the whole back of it so you guys can see, and then we'll share the other one as well. Okay, got a bunch of pins still in here. I'll take those out before I stab myself too much. Okay. Yeah, nobody needs that. All right, so here's the back of it, so you can see how much it's quilted. Okay, and that sparkle cuddle is just so yummy. It's really lovely, but you can see the difference. So granted, this isn't completely finished, but you've got the idea. But you can see how much body it has. Trying to figure out what the right word is for it. How, like I want to say stiff, and it's not stiff, but it's got some oomph to it. Yeah, so it's got some oomph. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
So this is the one without the batting. You can see how it doesn't at all. Okay, so I can like wad this up. If I wad this up, the difference. Yep. This doesn't wad quite as much. So if you want a real drapey blanket, one that you could drag around, it's nice to do it without the batting. If you want a little bit of added weight or body to it, this makes a difference. This will make it hold its shape better too. So let me show you the differences in the corners. Okay, and I think you can probably see that they're different. This one just is floppier. Okay. Yep. This one I didn't do the stitching here, so it's a little funkier.
Oh, interesting. Got it.
This one I did. Okay, I always like to do it with the batting, but you can see they're a little. You can see the difference in how floppy they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not super obvious on camera, but definitely in person you can tell that if there's batting or not.
Right. So it really isn't that you need to do. So let me show you the whole front of this one is all finished. Oh, well, I'll show you this way.
I love it.
Ta-da. There we go. Okay, super pretty. I really like it. This one is smaller than the Daydream Quilt. It shows 8 colors, and I used 7 for this one, I think. So the other one is a little bit smaller, and it uses a 6-inch border rather than a 3-inch border. So I chose to do it a little bit smaller, 1 for room purposes, and 2 because I liked it. So that's the nice thing about doing these things is you have a lot of choice in what you want to do. So that was my point with the batting, is that the batting isn't necessary. You can do it absolutely either way. It depends on what you want the final outcome to look like and to feel like. So if you want a nice heavy blanket, make sure that you use a batting. If you want it to be light and a little bit drapier, do it without. Just make sure, especially if you are doing it without batting, that you are using a polyester thread. So the cotton threads, if you use them with the polyester and you stretch it at all, it will break. So make sure that you're using a polyester thread, because all of this is just along the stretch. So all of this is going to get tugged and pulled and have lots of stress on those seams. So make sure that they're stitched really nicely. Otherwise, that's it. So this will totally work with using it, like I said, with any sort of front, as long as you're using a cuddle back. So that's the trick with it, is to use a cuddle back. If you're using a cotton back, there's lots of other ways to bind it that would be probably easier than trying to fold under it 1/4 of an inch all the way around, which you could do, but really use a cuddle on the back, and then you get the soft, yummy cuddle backing and binding without having to do the other binding. So again, here's this example with the cotton and how the little bit of quilting that I did on the back.
And a longer napped luxe back too, right?
This is, I think this is marble.
Okay, so
so this is a luxe cuddle.
With only the 1-inch.
It's a 1-inch border.
And you didn't really have to do much with the miter, or nope. I mean, it's in there.
It's mitered.
Yeah.
And it has the batting up to that corner.
Got it.
So that's kind of the trick, is doing the binding up to, or the batting up to the corners is important. So making those measurements, and then making sure that you do some sort of like a little template will make it easier. And then you can replicate that over and over again. So whether you're doing it for a self-binding blanket for a quilt, or just, well, self-binding quilt or a self-binding blanket, the little corners are actually super easy. And I really like this little plastic because it's hardier. If you come to my classes, I always give you like cardstock to do it on, but plastic is pretty nice. So might have to up our game a little bit. All right, so do we have any more questions? I didn't even look over here. All right, so we don't have any more
I
questions,
think we're good.
Thanks for feeding some to me while we were going here. Today's winner is Kathy P. So congratulations, Kathy. You are today's winner. And what did I give you the wrong name?
Oh, with a K.
With a K. Yeah.
Because there's the other Kathy Pearson.
Kathy P won last week.
It was like, wait, she won again?
Kathy with a K, Kathy P with a K won this time. And
I'm like, wait a minute.
I was so confused by his look. He was just like, but wait, what happened? So Kathy P, congratulations. The other, more than one. We appreciate you watching and sharing. I will put together a kit of the other stuff that I have here with the strips and with the white and the backing, the sparkle backing, and I will send that to you to make your own version of the Daydream quilt with a self-binding. So I'm very excited to be back and doing the Sew Together Tuesdays. We'll be back next week. We're going to be doing, oh no, I already forgot. Oh, I know what we're doing. We're doing the Cuddle Ball. So the Cuddle Ball is a project that's in the beginner box. So if you have bought a beginner box or you are considering buying a beginner box, oh, sorry.
I followed you.
You did, and then it confused me. So this is the beginner box, and this is what we're going to be doing next week. So we've done a bunch of the projects that are in here already. The Cuddle Ball is one we haven't tackled yet, so we're going to tackle that and then throw in some other options on what you can do to make it cute and fun, and some different sizing and that sort of stuff. So this is, if you haven't gotten the beginner box, this is a great project from there. If you got it, it's a great one. So we're going to be doing that next week, and we'll be back here in the studio for a couple more weeks before we head out to Quilt Festival. So thank you very much. I want to see if there's anything else. No, Kathy P, get a hold of us through Facebook. We'll get your mailing address, and we will send you all of that stuff so you can make your own little quilt. So go on out there, make some strip quilts, some whatever quilts, and then bind them with the self-binding technique. It is really super easy, and as you can see, it's very versatile and soft, yummy, lovely. All right, until next time, happy sewing.